Why did the social media addict break up with their phone? They found out that he was seeing other apps. Why did the student bring a ladder to school? Because they wanted to reach new heights of concentration. So the other day I asked my doctor for advice on improving my focus. So he told me to stop multitasking and focus on one thing at a time. So now I'm not sure how I'm supposed to text, watch TV, and eat pizza all at once. One time I tried to come up with a joke about consistency, but I kept changing my mind. So I tried to organize a professional hide-and-seek tournament, but it was a complete failure because good players are just so hard to find. So I was going to tell you a joke about construction, but I'm still working on that one.
Support for the Big Picture podcast comes from Sesame Care. Find the best price for the highest quality physicians. Book an appointment in minutes for as low as $19. You can find out more in the links in the episode show notes.
Support for the Big Picture podcast comes from Deal. Compliantly hire anyone, anywhere, in 5 minutes with Deal. Deal is your one-stop shop for hiring, paying, and managing your remote team. We stay on top of local labor laws across the world to ensure compliance and mitigate risk so that you don't have to. You can find out more in the links in the episode show notes.
Hello and welcome to episode 214 of the Big Picture podcast. I'm your host, Olubukunmi. So on this episode, I had an insightful conversation with my cousin, Olubukunmi BK Olukoya. So BK is married and he lives in the UK where he works as a principal consultant for a global consultancy firm. He has a background in quantity surveying. He's also a mission and community leader at a Christian youth group called Impact Mission UK, which is focused on reaching and inspiring the millennial and Gen Z demographic. So we talked about the disadvantages of social media in terms of focus and attention spans, consistency, effort, attitude, and hard work, why some people seem to have different personalities when you meet them in person compared to when you interact with them online, why some people are more aggressive online than in person, why many people don't realize how long it takes to achieve success, because successful people tend to show their highlight reels on social media. We talked about the reason why bad behaviors are more likely to be reinforced when the consequences of those bad behaviors are not immediately obvious, and lots more. So details on how to get in touch with BK are in the show notes. And without further ado, here is my conversation with Olubukunmi BK Olukoya.
Cool. So yeah, my name is Bukunmi Olukoya. My full name is Olubukunmi Olukoya. Bidis is laughing. I don't even know where to start from. I don't know where to start introducing myself from, or to start by saying I'm Bidemi's cousin. So this is actually I find it very interesting and honored. So I'm going to be as professional as possible. Obviously, you know that there's only this much professionalism that you can have in the family. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting one. But yeah, I'm a consultant. I work as an infrastructure consultant. I work for a company, probably just not mention the name, but I sort of work on the strategy side. My background is in quantity surveying, so I trained as a quantity surveyor, worked as a QS for about 10 years before deciding to move to sort of advisory strategy side. Although along the line, when I was actually working as a QS, I'd always sort of gotten involved in sort of more advisory type work, more sort of strategic, sort of front-facing, advising sort of investors, asset owners, regulators at work. And I've got about, almost years, I decided that was sort of the direction I wanted to go. So I'm fully in that space now. I work as a principal consultant for a global consultancy firm. So that's what I do in terms of my day-to-day work. I'm also a mission and community leader. I lead a mission called Impact Mission. And it's a mission that is focused on reaching the millennial and Gen Z generation, just inspiring them to be change agents and influence the culture for Christ. Well, as you can tell now, I'm a Christian, devoted Christian. I'm married to one wife, and yeah, so we live in the United Kingdom. So it's brilliant to be on this pod with my cousin.
Nice. Thanks for that. As you were introducing yourself, I mean, a lot of people can pick up on that. You have a career, you have a mission and community leadership role as well. Yeah. So let's start with that. So how long have you been in that community leadership mission work? How long have you been in that role?
In that role, it's kind of one of them ones where it's kind of difficult to kind of like say exactly because it's almost like I've been doing youth work, I suppose, for a very long time. So yeah, I was part of I think I was like assistant youth leader as far back as 2010, I think, or maybe 11, possibly. But in terms of leading a community, and actually leading a community and leading a mission, I'd probably say 2015. Yeah, I'll say 2015 is when we actually started the mission work that we do with Impact. It used to be called Response. And in 2017, we actually established the community side of it. So yeah, I'd say 2015 for the mission. And that's 8 years. And in terms of the community, probably say 6 years.
I want to ask, does that coincide with your time in the UK? When did I remember all of you guys moving to the UK for school at some point. And
Yes. So actually, interestingly, when I came into the UK, I joined the campus fellowship maybe a couple of years after. And that's probably sort of where that interest started to solidify, in sort of youth work, in sort of campus ministry. That's where it started to develop, evolve, and solidify. So yeah, that's something that I grew into. One day I was on. I went to a youth camp. Right. No, again, I joined the church. Obviously, was part of the youth group. Started to become really involved in the youth group. And we went for a youth camp one time in 2008, I think. Yeah, 2008. We went to the youth camp in Wales, and we were there. And someone just came out and was talking about their experience of campus fellowship. And this is interesting. This is how, sometimes you get really inspired by something that you maybe would be thinking, yeah, I know it's going to be inspiring, but you don't know how far-reaching that the effect of that experience will be. So she came up and she was speaking about campus fellowship, and I just got stirred up. And I remember going up to her after the meeting just to ask more questions about the fellowship, and she mentioned a few names, and I remember going on Facebook just searching for I think she was saying, oh, this person is in Birmingham and they are part of the fellowship, or I can't remember exactly how, but I remember just searching to say, okay, who is this person? Got to connect with them and then connect with the fellowship kind of thing. And that's how I got connected with the fellowship at the time. And that was part of that journey for me. Obviously, the work that I did within the local church I was in also was happening at the time. I was a worship leader in church. I was part of the youth group, and then I had this fellowship that I was going to outside of church, and that was what I said. The combination of all of that, God used that to sort of help just prepare me for the work that I'm doing now.
Nice. Listening to what you're describing, this actually plays into a similar track for me as well. I came to the US in 2012, finished grad school and a few other graduate degrees as well. As far as hobbies go, there was a time I had 2 mobile apps on Apple and Google, and then that evolved into writing a book. And then here we are talking on a podcast. And at every point in time, similar to your description of having a meeting with someone, which I don't even want to say it's a chance meeting, because you were somewhere, you went to a youth camp, which positioned you to be able to meet with someone. And then you met with someone else. And here you are 7-8 years later doing this thing that you were supposed to be doing. In the same way, me reading a book led to an interest in, okay, I have all this knowledge. Maybe I can also write a book. I listen to podcasts. Oh, I like what these people talk about. I actually know 1 or 2 things about this topic. Maybe I can also have a podcast. And from your description of what you do as a mission and community leader, a lot of your work focuses on youth, young people, maybe the older teenagers versus the younger adults. In the world we live in today, we see a lot of things on social media and things that are adjacent to social media. And what I mean by things adjacent to social media is we have all these groups, WhatsApp groups, Facebook groups on social media platforms, which lead to organizing some form of communities around those platforms. Not all of those communities are healthy, in quotes. You have a physical community. How much of your physical community touches social media? How much does social media touch your physical community? Maybe you can just start from that. Your exposure to social media as a mission and community leader.
No, that's brilliant. I think, I suppose to start with, on a personal note, I do use social media. I don't know if that counts as being active. I'm of course not as active as some, but I'm relatively, I'll say I'm pretty active on social media. I have spells. I have times where I'm just like right now. I don't have so much time, or just like everybody else, I suppose. Or just like a lot of people, where I'm like, I can't commit as much to being on social media, but I see the value in it. I think it goes without saying. I see the value in social media. I see the revolutionary aspect of it, and what it can do and how it can help. I also see the downside. I see the problems. Again, like a lot of people, I see the challenges, I see the issues, I see the potential for it to sometimes almost like offsets the benefits, if that makes sense. As a community, we are present on social media. We use social media. We've got a media team that manage our social media. What we found actually was, obviously we became like everybody else. I think it's safe to say we started to use, can I say we started to use our social media a bit more during pandemic? Probably, just naturally speaking, physical interactions were limited. So just naturally, social media became an avenue for doing things in terms of just, keeping people up to date with what's going on. WhatsApp groups, I suppose, in terms of, became a platform for sharing information and updates. It's difficult because these things were happening, but I imagine that if you pay attention, if you pay a little bit more attention and you actually do some analysis, you probably find that we probably picked up a little bit during pandemic.
Right.
And Zoom, we started using Zoom as a platform for our meetings. As we transitioned away from pandemic, though, I noticed very quickly that quite a lot of people wanted that physical interaction again, and so that transition started to happen when they allowed us to sort of start to meet again in person. We took that option and we came back to our physical gatherings, as opposed to predominantly being on Zoom. We kept Zoom just to keep that what you call it, just to keep that ease, and keep it as an option for people who may not find it convenient at times to be there in person. Now we've actually transitioned from Zoom to YouTube for a few reasons. We saw that for what we were trying to do, actually, YouTube seemed to be the best, especially in terms of the I suppose the dynamics of the transitions of the meetings. I suppose a lot of people that run programs and run events will understand this, that, in terms of the transition, when you have Zoom and people in person, you need strong Wi-Fi, otherwise things will not be in sync.
Right.
And just the connection would just not work. That's one. Also, the quality of your streaming and of the things that you put out. Zoom doesn't really support the best video quality at times, and so we are doing YouTube and in person, and we're encouraging people to actually come in person. So as a community, we do interact with social media. Obviously, we're aware of the danger, like everyone else, but it's one of those things where, because you know that when used correctly, it can have a really strong impact. And in fact, it's not just that. I think that in today's world, there are things that you can achieve using social media that you probably will not be able to achieve using any other means. It's just as simple as that, and especially when you talk about reach. I think reach is one thing that social media gives you. One things I do, and maybe I didn't mention at the start, is I actually I suppose I consider myself to be a recording artist, and I have put out a track recently.
Right.
Not soon. I remember just looking at the analytics to see where my music was being played, and I was seeing things like Mexico, and it's just like I've never been to Mexico,
Yeah.
But my music went to several countries that I'd never been to. That's the thing that you get, with some of it would be obviously because of the what you call it, some of it will be because of the fact that I've got my music on streaming platforms, but some of it will also be due to the publicity that it's getting through social media. So
I was gonna bring that up later, but now that you brought it up, you actually have a track that you put out a few years ago now?
It was 2022. Yeah, it was last year actually.
Oh wow, it seems longer than that for some reason.
It does seem like it. Yeah, I had to think about that myself. I remember because I released it on my birthday, 2022. Now people.
Yeah, we can bleep it out if you want.
Support for the Bid Picture podcast comes from Snake River Farms. Whether you're a seasoned veteran or beginner to beef, the pioneers of American Wagyu have got you covered with $25 off your order. Receive $25 off orders of over $149 with code SWAPSRF at Snake River Farms. You can find out more in the links in the episode show notes.
So talking about the reach, you mentioned the reach social media gives you, and I noticed that as well way before I came to the US, because back then in Nigeria, using Facebook, everybody had Facebook. We all had BlackBerry, and you were on BBM, sending your pins everywhere, and people were basically trying to connect with each other, which was the original plan for Facebook before it became what it's turned into nowadays.
Yeah.
And fundamentally, human beings are social beings.
Yes.
People would rather connect with other people. But now we see social media making that connection for us, but it's short-circuiting the process of connecting.
Yes.
I am here in Florida talking to you in the UK. Before social media, this wouldn't have been possible. Maybe on phone, but we can actually see each other while talking to each other. Mm-hmm. For this sustained amount of time, and multiply that with all your friends and former classmates and people you work with. Now people work with teams across the world and everything. So it allows reach to be possible. But then maybe let's talk about the downside so we can appreciate the advantages. Yeah. In your own opinion, now personal opinion, yes, what do you think are the downsides of social media?
Good. This is a very, very big topic. It really is. I suppose starting from I think anything that is not properly regulated has a potential to actually hurt people and to cause harm. And I don't know how much regulation we have around the use of social media at the moment, because to a large extent it seems to be the case that people can. I know people have done things wrong and gotten into trouble, but I'm still not sure if the control and the regulation around the use of social media is the place that it needs to be, if that makes sense. And that's obviously an issue. And the human nature is that people can become extreme. And when that is allowed without any consequence, then that's a problem. So that's one. I think that the effect and the impact on social media on people, let's say young people, for just in this instance, in terms of just the obsession, the obsession with social media, the obsession with people's image, the obsession with, I suppose, the obsession with everybody wanting to, I suppose, portray a view, if that makes sense. There's nothing wrong with that, but I suppose when it becomes obsessive to the point where actually the views around that makes sense, but the need to have your own individual view, regardless of whether there's any logical backing to it or whether or not it makes any sense, if that makes sense, can be an issue. Do you see what I mean? And we see that. We see that where people go on Twitter, for example, and just put out things just to trend. Like, they know it doesn't make any sense, but are you seeing where I'm coming from? Like, yeah. And I think that's a problem, So that's another thing. What else? I think, again, like you said, it's interesting that social media is supposed to bring us together, but what you find at times is that we actually, in some instances, actually, I suppose, pull people further apart. And there's no real organic, concrete, I suppose, connection happening in some instances. And especially around nuances with when you're in a physical, face-to-face conversation. Does that make any sense? So, for example, we're both on the screen right now, and there are nuances that we're not picking up on. Do you see what I mean? Just because there's just so much barrier at the moment. And if I was, so for example, I'd probably struggle to read your emotions as much as if I was with you in person.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, although, yes, it's doing the work of allowing me to be able to speak to you, even though you're thousands of miles away, it's not necessarily giving me it's not always going to necessarily give me the true picture of what's happening with you, for example. You see what I mean? And so I suppose if we then over depend on it, the point is, what are we losing out on in the long term?
A few weeks ago, I traveled to my company's headquarters to visit with the team and, just talk to people, I'm a person. I wanted to say I'm a personal person. No, I'm someone who enjoys personal interaction. So I've been working with my team for a while, and I'm like, okay, let me just, visit and interact with people. And one of the first things my coworkers, not even someone on my team, someone else, one of the first things she said was, my in-person interaction is similar to my online interaction. So I asked her to explain further. And then she was like, because I'm always turning on my video during Zoom calls. And she said, the way I interacted on Zoom is the way I interact in person. And I'm thinking, why should that be different? Because that implies that for most people, at least the people she is used to, the Zoom interactions, maybe they don't even turn on their cameras. And the people that turn on their cameras, maybe they have this facade put on. And then when you now see them in person, it's different. And it tied back into one of the podcast episodes I had with another friend. She's here in Tampa, Nermin Amin. And then she was saying she met some people online. And when she meets them in person, it's like they're quieter, maybe they are shy, and it's not just a one-time interaction. That's how they are after multiple interactions. So that got me thinking about how the conversation with my coworker when I traveled for work started to make sense, saying people online have this totally different facade when you meet them in person. And how much of that has to do with this social media and like you mentioned, an obsession with putting out a particular view of yourself. Have you come across this dichotomy?
I suppose if when you think about it, again, I suppose I'm trying to be very careful here because I don't know whether it's necessarily all bad. No, well, it won't be all necessarily all bad. I think some of it obviously has to do with just people's personalities, if that makes sense. And I think there's a room for that. There should be room for that. Some people are more comfortable, I suppose, putting out content through a medium like social media. And so if you had such people in a face-to-face setting, they'd probably be less expressive. Because for whatever reason, they feel a lot more comfortable sharing their thoughts, their views through social media. We've seen cases of actors and musicians who will, give an incredible performance on set or on stage. But when you meet them in person, you realize that they're actually reserved and shy.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean? So that's I suppose I'm not so sure that that's necessarily an effect of social media. I think that's probably more to do with people's personality and how comfortable some people are in face-to-face in-person interaction versus when they're on a platform. Do you see what I mean? At the same time, obviously, the fact that social media does give a voice to people who use it for cynical reasons as well. Does that make sense? So there's people who become a lot, they're very abusive on social media, but in person they're probably the quietest people, and that's probably one of the downsides, that someone who I suppose would not feel comfortable being abusive in person, for example. But because of the fact that it's like what you get with sort of racism in stadiums and no, sorry, not racism. When you get with like people, so racism on social media, for example,
right?
And then you see a tweet from someone and they are like so aggressive, and then I don't know, the police finds them and they're like this very tiny 14-year-old kid who's actually a quiet person. Do you see what I mean? Yeah. So that happens, and it's very, very difficult to I suppose ignore the fact that in that instance, whether intentionally or intentionally, whether social media has contributed to giving people like that a voice and an opportunity to be different from their default, default personality.
Yeah.
So in that instance, obviously, we've seen that happen basically.
Yeah, there was a case I worked on, a cyberbullying case. So my job is interesting. I work on investigations that don't seem to have anything to do with cybersecurity, but at the end, you see where cyber comes in, either in the beginning, in the middle, or at the end. So there was this cyberbullying case. Long story short, the bully is a 16-year-old shy introvert bullying a 13-year-old. I have no idea. Maybe they met in school or something. Mm-hmm. So when this bully was now asked to apologize, they brought two of them into the same room saying, you have to apologize. What you did was wrong. You cannot just go online and say bad things about people, blah, blah, blah. And then the bully started to cry, like broke down crying. And then his parents, of course, they knew his tendencies, and the mom started crying with him, and the dad was just shaking his head saying, this is what you see when you allow kids too much access to social media, because it was behind the screen, having confidence, bullying someone else.
Yeah.
When it's time to like face to face say, why did you do this? You hurt this kid. Now apologize. So that showed the bully himself was dealing with some insecurities.
Of course. Yeah.
His personality is not exactly aggressive. But being behind the screen, being behind the anonymity of a keyboard and a screen, and we see that play out in basically almost every other instance of social media aggression. On Twitter, people are fighting back and forth. And if I go out and maybe I'm in a mall and I see someone, the way they're typing, I can tell, oh, this one is fighting with someone else. And it just gives them so much confidence. And when you now put 2, 3, 4 people in a room saying, okay, that thing you were fighting about on Twitter, continue here in this room. People are much nicer in person.
Yes, of course.
Because you go on a bus, public train, you can't just start fighting with someone in public. But that's exactly what happens on social media. Someone, you post a picture, someone makes a comment, you read the comment wrongly, or even if it's a mean comment, and then the fight starts.
Yeah.
Let's put that in a physical space. You go out, you dress nice, someone comments on your shoe or your handbag or something. Even if it's a mean comment, you are less likely to start fighting that person in that public setting.
Yes.
So
yeah. And it's in instances like that you can't, I suppose you can't, or the creators of social media platforms can't abdicate themselves from the responsibility to safeguard, if that makes sense. It's difficult because I suppose everybody needs to be able to take responsibility for their actions, right? At the end of the day. Yeah. But I still believe that there's more that can be done. There's more that can be done in ensuring that these platforms are safe and don't encourage the wrong behaviors. I think, again, like you said, you have instances where you have people who their default setting is to not be aggressive. But just the idea and the fact that, when you think about the, it's almost like action and the reward of your action or the consequences of your action. Let's use consequences. When people cannot see consequences for their actions, it can drive the wrong behavior. And that's the point. If someone tweets over and over again something abusive and nothing ever happens to them as a way of consequence, then they are they're likely to carry out that action again. As opposed to if something, say for example, that platform or that account was closed down immediately, for example, and you somehow are not able to come on that platform again for another 6 months or a year. You think twice before you do it.
I was just trying to note down something you said just now. When the consequences are not obvious, it can drive the wrong behavior.
Yeah.
That is very profound. And on so many levels, we see this from little kids to adults, male, female, in almost, let me just say, in every career, whether you're an athlete or you are a professional cyber person, or you work in strategic advising, or you are even just a market seller. When the consequences of your actions are not obvious, it drives the wrong behavior. Maybe that is the fundamental problem with social media.
Yeah.
The creators of social media thought, oh, let's create this thing that will bring people together. They couldn't have foreseen the second order consequences of how people would use social media. People are always going to do people things. Leave people alone for a while and they start to, fight each other on social media.
Support for the Big Picture podcast comes from Shut the Box Dice Game. Dating back to 12th century France, sailors cherished playing shut-the-box game. In modern times, whether you're camping with friends or relaxing with family, you'll have endless fun with this easy-to-learn game. Buy 2, get 1 free, plus free shipping within the United States. You can find out more in the links in the episode show notes.
So, talking about when consequences are not obvious, social media is good, it brings people together, and we see all this narcissism going on, and it leads to obsessions. There are people I have on my Instagram, and all they post is pictures of themselves. Again, there's nothing wrong with that. Every now and then, I post pictures of myself in a gym, workout pictures. More recently, I've been posting pictures of me and my wife. A lot of people don't know that I have a son until they start to see pictures of me, my wife, and my son.
Yep.
But that's just my own way of how I use social media.
Yeah.
But narcissism, when it gets too much, leads to all of these other downsides. And again, the consequences are not obvious, meaning it can drive. So even if you're not fighting someone on social media, just being too narcissistic has downsides. So what would you say about the role of how social media is degrading people's attention, people's focus? A lot of problems with being consistent nowadays, which is a topic you also touched on a few weeks ago that I was able to join you on that monthly Inspires. In your opinion, how would you say social media is messing with people's focus and attention nowadays?
First of all, I want to touch on the consequences bit, and I'll speak about the attention thing. I cannot remember the exact opposite of it, but there's something called punishers, and there's something called, I'm trying to remember if it's called reinforcers. I might not get this technically right, so forgive me. But the idea is that when you carry out an action, if that action has punishers, right, you're less likely to carry out that action again. But if that action has something that reinforces that behavior, then you're likely to go ahead and do it again, if that makes sense. So it's in a sense, if you I don't know, if you study and you study well in your undergrad and you become the best in your class, and because of that, they give you a Dean's Prize for the best students in engineering, in electronics and engineering, let's just say, right? Dean's Prize is $5,000, right? Great. And in addition to that, you get a scholarship to do your master's. That's going to reinforce that behavior, right? That's enough motivation for you to get into your master's class and think, let's do this again, right? You do it again, this time around, £10,000, $10,000 or pounds, and a full scholarship to do your PhD, right? You get into your PhD, you're reinforced to do that to do that again. Again, your PhD gets, world-class publication, and companies are now fighting or competing left, right, center to give you a job. First job is a 6-figure salary. I'm just saying something that's good and a nice picture here. But the idea is that that's reinforcing that behavior because you're getting a benefit from that action.
Yeah.
Right. If you are caught speeding and you get given points on your license, as what happened in the UK, for example, you're less likely not going to want to speed the next day.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean? Because then there's a consequence for that action, and that's just it's just normal social engineering of the human mind and behavior. Does that make sense? Like you get a consequence for an action, you're less likely to. Even as simple as if you're in a meeting room and you are caught, doing something on your phone, and the chair of the meeting says that's distracting and that's very rude. You're likely to put your phone away, and you're not likely to pick up your phone until the end of that meeting. Do you see what I mean?
Until you leave the building.
Do you understand? But that's just how we're wired, and that's how we're wired as humans. But again, and that's if you apply that principle to social media, for example, And like I said, someone goes on social media and they can literally put out anything they want, literally say anything they want without any consequence. Right? That's almost like creating a condition where anything goes. And that's very dangerous. No, it's actually more dangerous than we actually realize, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It puts you in a bubble where anything goes. Because if you come out of that bubble, right, and you did certain things or you said certain things, there would be consequences for it. Do you see what I mean? So I'll give you an example. If you were to stand in front of someone's house and say, for example, I will do this to that person, right? You're likely to get arrested by the police, right? Or at least questioned by the police, right?
Yeah.
But what gives you the right to be able to do that on social media? The same action. The only difference is you're now in this bubble where you feel like you're protected, and that same thing that you will not be able to do in person, you now have the right to do. And it doesn't work like that. The law doesn't actually work like that. The law doesn't say this is permissible in person, it's not permissible online. Does that make any sense?
Yeah.
Or this is permissible in person, this is permissible online and it's not permissible in person. It doesn't work like that. And there needs to be that consistency, in the way that people are held to account, for their actions, whether it be online or in person. Because the threat online is not necessarily less than the threat in person. And as we've seen, people have been threatening online and actually it's happened. Do you see what I mean? So that's what I'll say to that. In terms of the question around how social media is affecting people's attention span and how people's ability to concentrate, I think that's a real problem. That's a real problem because we've heard instances and we've probably all been in situations where we probably just realized that, wait, hang on a minute. I've sort of been on my phone quite a lot today. It's Saturday, and I planned I was going to sleep, and I planned I was going to do this and this, but I've literally been on the phone for the last hour and a half, 2 hours, and humans have that tendency to be distracted. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
As you work on yourself and as you evolve and develop and as you become more intentional, that becomes less and less of a problem, if that makes sense. But for someone who struggles with concentrating and paying attention in the first place, social media is not your friend in that sense. Does that make sense? Or social media you can get to a situation where social media will not be your friend. Does that make any sense? Is what I'm trying to say. Overall, there's still the advantage of it, but it can have a lot more negative effect on someone who's inherently indisciplined.
Yeah.
Is the way I'm going to put it. And if you wake up in the morning and the first thing you're doing is grabbing your phone, for example, I think that's a sign of a problem.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So the first thing you do, you wake up in the morning, you don't do anything else. I'm going to grab my phone and I want to see what's happening on Instagram. There's nothing happening on Instagram that is as important as starting your day by saying, praying to God and say, Lord, this is my day, this is my plans, this is, there's nothing more important. Does that make sense? Whatever is on social media can wait. The things that you should be aware of anyway. If that makes sense. So that'd be what I'd say about that. And again, there are ways now to combat that. People do all sorts in terms of some people put their phone on airplane mode, for example. So they don't necessarily get, I suppose, notifications from social media.
Yeah, screen time.
Yeah. So there's many different ways if you're intentional and you actually want to do something about it.
Yeah. The way I use my phone is so upside down, and I tell people, it's one thing to know yourself and the kind of things that affect your focus and attention. It's another thing to now do something about that. Me personally, I have social media, but I basically use it as a means of communication. So I open Instagram. If I have messages, that red thing is gonna pop up. I read the messages, then I close it. If I upload an episode, I post it on social media. I write the caption, or you can listen to the episode here. For all the podcasts I'm in charge of, the True Ball, this one, the Yoruba Proverbs, and then the Cyber Case Files. And then I just close the app. I don't even read the comments. I don't go back to see notifications, who has viewed my story, who has liked the picture. No, because it's going to be there next week. It's going to be there 2 weeks from now. So I really don't need to keep checking all the time. People I bring on the podcast, some of them I message them on Instagram because that's the only way we can maybe we met through someone. There are people I bring on the podcast through LinkedIn. Again, I use LinkedIn as a messaging platform. There are people that come on the podcast through Twitter. I have a Twitter account for the podcast, not my personal Twitter account. And then there's email and text messages and so on. So I know how distracting apps can be for me. So all my apps, with the exception of text and email, I don't even see notifications for them. Meaning, if I want to use the app, I will go and find it. And again, the way I have my phone set up, it's so blank and so distracted. As in, there's really nothing to draw me in. Yeah, it doesn't look interesting. So all of this to say that the way I use my phone works for me. To the point of setting my phone to black and white. There's an accessibility setting on iPhones that it won't even be colorful.
Yes.
So you won't even see all those bright red alerts. So all of this to say that I'm being intentional, which is the word you use, about how much of my attention I devote to things like phones and laptop notifications, etc. Because it shows up in when people ask me, well, what do? I tell them all the things. And then they ask, how do you find time for all these things? Well, then I outline how a big part of my day has nothing to do with my phone. I've gone out of the house and I forgot my phone. And the beauty of having a MacBook is you can text from your laptop. So I'm still communicating with my wife as needed. I'm still reachable. She knows where I am. She can reach me, but my phone is at home.
Yeah.
And I'm not even missing anything. So focus on attention.
I say that's healthy. I think that's healthy. I think the idea, and you hear people joke about it, that my phone is my life. But it's not.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it is to the extent that you make it to be. And that's precisely part of the problem. Part of the problem is that, your brain has effectively been told that you need that phone to be able to function in a sense. Does that make sense? And I think it's rewiring and retraining yourself to a point where that's not the case. I think that's very, very important. It is important because the amount of stress and anxiety that can lead to in people's lives, that constant, the flooding of people's phones with messages, and the fact that, it feels like everything is urgent, it puts you in this ready to act mode, constantly, and that cannot be healthy, if that makes sense. And whether or not it's urgent or not, you feel like it is. As soon as you hear that sound or you see that, like you said, that bright red notification on WhatsApp, you feel, okay, I need to respond to this. And I suppose, again, like there are different ways to combat that and different ways to deal with that. And the people who have sort of developed different strategies, and part of that is actually reminding yourself that you should, to an extent, I'm not saying all the time, to an extent, be able to control how you respond and when you respond to things. If that makes sense, you should be able to do it according to to an extent, what works for you. If that makes sense, because you're the one that you know exactly what you're dealing with. You know what your pressures are. You know what your schedule is, and you should be able to work things around. Okay, I'm going to respond to this in half an hour, because I'm going to respond to this first because that came in first. And I think once people start to feel more in control in that sense, that can help reduce stress, reduce anxiety in the long run.
Support for the Bid Picture podcast comes from Softer. Softer lets you stop waiting for developers so that you can build software without devs, blazingly fast. It is trusted by over 100,000 teams worldwide. You can find out more in the links in the episode show notes.
Yeah. And I mean, we can talk about this all day long, but at the end of the day, it boils down to each person's knowing your pressure points, knowing the things that work for you, the things that doesn't work for you. And even way before I became a parent, I've always wondered how and why we see people who are successful. Elon Musk, for example, has 4 companies that he runs. Everyone has 24 hours in a day. Nobody has 25 hours. Nobody has 23 hours. And I've always been curious about how possible is it for certain people. You hear their story and you think, wait a minute, this person has a simple, basic story just like everybody else. Someone comes from your hometown and they were able to get to a new country and they were able to use their 24 hours in a day, and now they own multiple companies, and they literally come from your hometown. Their family house is 2 houses away from your family house, just to make it a little bit personal. And you now wonder, how is that possible? And in the US, the example I like to use, because I live here, everyone has equal opportunity, but not everyone puts in equal effort. Therefore, not everyone would have equal outcomes.
Yes.
Opportunity, effort, outcome. So when you now meet people who are saying, oh no, this person must have cheated their way to the top. And I'm thinking, maybe they did cheat their way to the top. But that can be applicable to every successful person.
Of course. Yeah.
So maybe the people cheated, which is perfectly okay. Not like it's a good thing to cheat. However,
automatic.
Yeah. However, there's this thing called effort. In a situation, in a country like the US and the UK, you see the results of your efforts. I don't want to make it simplistic, but it's kind of how it operates. Unlike where we both come from, where you have to know someone who knows someone. In the US, in the UK, I mean, if you know someone who knows someone, that can help you. But that's not the primary thing that will help you. It's the amount of effort you put into your work that people above you would see, this guy actually works hard. Let's lift him up.
Yeah.
Now, if you know someone, then that multiplies that effort.
Yeah.
So to kind of start wrapping up here, how much of social media has impacted the amount of effort people put into anything? Not even just their career, not even just their family, just anything people do, from your own opinion.
I think there's 2 sides to it. I think, let's start from the side of course, you can get inspired, by the things that you see on social media. Social media is such a good place to get ideas, to get inspiration. There are times where you want to do something, and before you know it, you see something similar on social media, and you're like, yes, that makes sense. I've been really trying to, to do this or start this business, and oh wow, to think that someone else is doing something similar, and there's so much I can learn from them, or this, you can have that. But at the same time, I think because we live in a generation now where, social media can also be, I suppose things can be deceptive, and sometimes people can see the output or the outcome first and not see the effort that goes into the outcome, and actually assume that it's actually easy to achieve, and actually assume that it doesn't actually require a lot of effort. And so there's that, there's that, because you don't see the process. Social media cannot curate the whole process. And a lot of things that you see actually posted on social media, it basically represents the carefully curated version of people's lives. And human beings typically tend to put their best foot forward. And sometimes that can become an extreme where people actually just pull out just the positives and, just the fancy pictures of them eating in nice restaurants and taking, first class, jets to places. And you don't realize that actually they had a time where they had no money in their account, because that story is not on the photo grid for you to see.
Yeah.
And so it just means that a young person growing is thinking, I want to be a musician. This guy started in 2019 and they're a superstar now. They've got all this money, they've got all these houses on the island in Nigeria, and they've got all of this and all of that. And it only took them 4 years. But no, actually, it didn't take them 4 years. The first time they posted a song was 4 years ago. But actually, they'd been working on their craft for 7 years before then. Or doing smaller shows and doing, a lot more on the, behind the scene work to be able to get to a point where their talent was able to be noticeable by the world and by people who were willing to invest in it. But again, when you go through their Instagram, you go back to 4 years ago and you see the first time they put out a song and you're thinking, 4 years, I can do this. No, it's not 4 years, that's 11 years. So, and I'm not saying it's going to take everyone 11 years, but I'm just saying that can be a problem where you don't have full visibility of people's journeys because of the fact that either because of the fact that social media does not necessarily allow you to be able to necessarily put out the whole of your journey and the whole of your process, or because sometimes people choose to ignore that part of the story and just focus on what they want to focus on.
Yeah, and what you said is actually true, because a lot of even musicians we all know, and people say, "Oh, this person is now topping the charts on Spotify and everywhere," and people were like, "Oh wow, they just started to sing." No, and many of those musicians actually say in their songs that people think I'm a newcomer, but no, I've been grinding for years, and we see that with people, authors, for example. I mentioned I published a book recently. Depending on the questions people ask me when I tell them, "Oh, I published a book in 2020," people that ask, "How long did it take you?" Those are people who are thinking of writing a book, 100%. Because almost everybody else would just be like, "Oh, wow, nice. That's so cool. You wrote a book. Congrats." Because maybe they're not interested they don't know how long it takes. They're like, "Oh, you wrote a book. Congrats." But people who have been thinking about it, same thing from when I add mobile apps, depending on the questions people ask, so how long did it take you to work on this app and develop it and put it on the app stores? Those are people who are also thinking about doing a mobile app, but for some reason they couldn't get to doing it. Same thing with writing a book, even podcasting. I tell people that, "Oh, I've had a podcast since 2 years ago, January 2021. And then they're like, "Oh, how did you get into podcasting?" So I started breaking it down for them. I've been listening to podcasts since I can remember, as far back as 2014. National Public Radio, NPR podcast, every now and then while I'm working, while I'm in the gym. And then I started to pay attention to, okay, what does it take to have a podcast? First of all, I need to know what you're talking about. Because the microphone and the software, all of those are maybe 0.5% of the process.
Yeah, the tools. They won't tell you what to say.
Yeah. But knowing what to say, even how to speak on the podcast, you cannot learn that. I mean, it's a different process for everybody. Some people learn it in 1 month, 3 months, 6 months. I know podcasters who have speech, people that train them on how to speak. As in, they pay money to go to someone to teach them how to speak. They've been podcasting for 10, 15 years, but they still have to keep learning it. But when I now meet people that say, "Oh, I want to get into podcasting, where can I start?" I mean, I can tell you where to start, but you need to know that this is a long process. I started 2 years ago, but I didn't prepare for it. 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I started preparing for it way before, even when I didn't realize I was preparing to be a podcaster. Because I would listen to something and then I would try and formulate what that person said in a different perspective. So maybe I listened to a sports podcast. Chelsea won the Champions League a few years ago. It was a 1-0 scoreline. And then I listened to podcasts that analyzed that particular match. And then after listening to that, I tried to, because I watched the match myself. And then I was thinking, I would have said this differently because, I mean, not like they were saying the wrong thing. They analyzed how the goal happened. And then Havertz ended up scoring the goal. And then I was thinking, I can analyze this differently. And then I break it down in my head. Same thing with if I listen to a cybersecurity podcast or any podcast whatsoever. That was me preparing to become a podcaster.
Yeah.
So it's just
it's
a process that people think, oh, Messi is the greatest footballer of all time. But were you there when Messi was actually playing football barefooted?
That's the process. That's the journey.
Yeah, that's when his journey started.
Yeah.
And LeBron James is a basketballer, top basketballer. Do you know that he actually stays up all night practicing different types of shots? You wouldn't see that on his Instagram.
Yeah. Good point.
Yeah.
Good point.
So to kind of wrap up here, is there anything else you would want to leave our audience with before we?
Yeah. No, I suppose this is a conversation we need to keep having. Yeah. It's easy to like look at the people that created social media and so the disruptors of technology that brought some of these innovations and these inventions and expect them to be the ones to make the change. But I think everyone needs to take responsibility. Genuinely, if you think about it, if every single person on social media was responsible for their action, then actually there probably be not so much for regulators to need to do, if that makes sense. Like if I was to take responsibility and make sure, I know how I should interact with people. I know how I should be responsible. I should speak in a way that I would want to be spoken to. Then I suppose it reduces the job of the regulators, if that makes sense. So as opposed to just thinking, let's wait until somebody comes and brings in a regulation that helps. I think if everybody was responsible for their actions, that would go a long way. And the other bit is also around the use of social media and some of the negative effects that it has. Again, that comes back to people taking responsibility, and everyone actually realizing, what is it that I can do to sort of help myself. So, for example, if I know that I easily get distracted, how I put it this way, there's a lot of people who maybe are high functioning, even though they have formed a lot of bad habits. Yeah, what I'll say to them is, don't be deceived by your eye functionality, and don't be deceived by the fact that you're still able to produce an output, regardless of how distracted or how ill-disciplined you are. What you need to focus on is what could be. What could be if you took out that distraction and if you took out that and you became a bit more disciplined. You will be surprised that you're actually stopping yourself from functioning at a level that you probably not imagined. And that's really it.
Wow, this has been so powerful. And anytime anytime we invite you to come on, I'm sure you'll be ready to, join us and we talk about a totally different topic or even just continue with the
I was going to say, I need to be on through ball, man. This season is anyway, we'll talk about this season for Chelsea, but so good.
yeah, definitely. We'll definitely make that work. Yeah. Now that the Champions League quarterfinals and semifinals is ramping up, I'll talk to Aki and we can, set something up.
Yeah. It's a write-off. I don't think let's just ignore this. We'll start the review next season. The review that's starting now. This is part of the process, right?
Yeah. I mean, Lampard said it's going to take a while because he is a product of Chelsea. He understands the system. We'll hope
for the best.
So this has been great. Regards to your lovely wife and your brother as well.
For sure.
Talk to you next time.
Yeah, thanks, man.
The Big Picture Podcast is produced by Sunshine Media in association with Olukoya Productions. Fact-checking by Zara Kuznetsova. Audio engineer Sergey Gorsky. Graphic design Stacey Graham. Senior producer Bidemi Ologunde. Executive producers Olufolani Ologunde and Tobiloba Ologunde. Please join me again on the next episode as I continue with a deep dive on cybersecurity's news, events, and incidents, and the lessons we can learn from them for robust cyber threat intelligence and awareness in our daily lives. Make sure you subscribe, rate, and review the Big Picture Podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, Pandora, TuneIn Radio, or anywhere you listen to podcasts. Also, please share the show with anyone that you think might benefit from it. For questions, comments, or any suggestions, please send an email to bidemi@thebidpicture.com. You can also get in touch on Twitter @bidpicture, on the Clubhouse app @bid, as well as on the Wisdom app @bidemi. Please remember to leave a review for the podcast if your platform allows you to do so. Thank you for your time. See you on the next episode. Bye for now.